It's time for some real education indeed. After all of the educational abuse, Dave, that we just watched for this last 20 minutes, time to focus it on something redeemable. If the humanities hadn't been hijacked by politically correct douchebags, you might still study things like John Milton's Paradise Lost, the great epic. So I'm declaring this Paradise Lost week. And as Christ and culture guy, you know, Paradise Lost is John Milton's great epic about the fall of Adam and Eve, one of the great works of literary history. It's the only really great English epic. You've got the great epics of the Greeks, you've got Dante, you've got Dante's Inferno, and then you've got Paradise Lost, right? Which is the only really fully formal epic in the English language. And Milton wrote it in 1667. He was what we would today call an evangelical Christian. Back then they called them Puritans, right? The same folks who in 1620 sought succor in this country from a tyrannous, religiously unfree government. Milton wrote Paradise Lost about the fall of Adam and Eve, and he knew when he wrote this he was going to have to write a lot about God. He was literally going to have to include God as a character in his book. And he knew. How does one put words in the mouth of God and not come off sounding foolish? How does one create God as a speaking character and not diminish the majesty of God? Well, Milton, I'm not going to say he succeeded 100%, but he probably came closer than anybody else in the history of literature to making a God convincingly sound like what God would be. But he knew how difficult his work, the work was cut out for him in trying to write this poem about the founding of the creation of Adam and Eve, the mind of God, the fall of Adam and Eve, the war in heaven between Satan and the angels. And so in the prologue to the book, he's asking God to come and help him. If I'm going to do this for you, God, I need your help. And what's a beautiful twist, whereas Homer in the Odyssey and the Iliad began his poem by calling on the muses, right? These goddesses of epic poetry to come and speak in my ear. What does the Christian do? He rejects all that paganism and calls directly for the Holy Spirit. And he speaks it here. He's calling for the Holy Spirit to help. He says, in writing this poem, Milton says, "And chiefly thou, O Spirit, you, O Spirit, who dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest. Thou, O Holy Spirit, from the first was present, and with thy mighty wings outspread, dove-like satst brooding upon the vast abyss, and madest it pregnant. I'm asking you, Holy Spirit of God, what Jesus called the Comforter, right? What in me, Milton says, what in me is dark illumine, and what is low raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. If you don't help me, I can't do it. If you help me, take what is dark in me and give me light." Now, that doesn't just mean the light of inspiration from the Holy Spirit. Remember, Milton was blind when he set about writing this great poem. Completely blind. So much like Beethoven went deaf before he heard his Ninth Symphony. Milton was blind. And so what he did to do this, when he's talking about darkness and light all throughout the poem, he's reflecting upon his own blindness. He didn't think he was able to do it, but with the help of the Holy Spirit, he dictated for 8 hours a day. He had 3 of his daughters. He dictated this poem to them. Pretty staggering what the Holy Spirit did do for John Milton. And if we had anything like normal and decent humanities programs in colleges, maybe your kids would be getting that instead of the kind of nonsense they're getting in college.